No one lasted more than 2 days in the Hayes mansion. By the end of the month, 23 caregivers had already quit. Some walked out crying, some left angry. One simply packed her bag in the middle of the night and disappeared without even asking for her last paycheck. Everyone in the small agency office whispered the same thing: "Don't take that job." But Daniel Carter sat there quietly, staring at the paper in his hands. $7,000 a week, live-in position, private estate, the kind of money he had never seen in his life. The woman behind the desk leaned forward and lowered her voice. "She's difficult," she said carefully. Daniel almost smiled. "Difficult how?" The woman hesitated. Then she sighed. "Paralyzed from the waist down after an accident 2 years ago. Billionaire. Used to run one of the biggest tech companies in the country." She paused. Now she barely speaks. When she does, people wish she hadn't. Daniel looked back down at the paper. The name printed on it felt heavy. Evelyn Hayes. Even he had heard of her once. The ruthless CEO who built Hayes Systems from nothing and crushed every competitor in her path. Newspapers used to call her the Ice Queen of Silicon Valley. Then the accident happened. A private jet crash. She survived. Her career didn't. And according to rumors, neither did her humanity. Caregivers say she throws things, the agency woman added. Insults people. Fires them within hours. Her staff lasts longer because they're used to it. Daniel leaned back in the chair. Outside the office window, rain was hitting the pavement hard. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from his daughter. "Lily, Dad, the landlord came again." Daniel closed his eyes for a second. 3 months behind on rent. 2 part-time jobs that barely covered food. A 7-year-old girl who pretended everything was okay. He opened his eyes again. "When do I start?" he asked. The woman blinked. "You're serious?" Daniel stood up, dead serious. Cadsiri looked less like a house and more like a silent fortress. Tall gates, stone walls, security cameras everywhere. The driver who picked Daniel up from the agency barely spoke during the hour-long ride. "Most people don't last," the man said finally, eyes still on the road. Daniel shrugged. "I've had worse bosses." The driver laughed, quietly. "You haven't met Miss Hayes?" When the gates slowly opened, Daniel felt something strange in his chest. The mansion stood at the end of a long driveway, lights glowing in a few windows. Beautiful, cold, lonely. Inside, the house was spotless, too spotless, like a museum no one lived in. A house manager greeted him briefly and handed him a small folder. "Your room is downstairs. Miss Hayes is in the West Wing." Daniel nodded. "Anything I should know before meeting her?" The man paused. Then he said something strange. "Don't take it personally." The room was dim when Daniel walked in. Large windows, soft lighting, medical equipment quietly humming, and in the center of the room sat a wheelchair. The woman in it didn't turn around. She was staring out at the dark garden. Daniel stepped closer. "Miss Hayes?" Slowly, the chair rotated. Evelyn Hayes looked exactly like the headlines used to describe her. Sharp eyes, cold expression, power in her presence, even sitting in a wheelchair. She studied him for a few seconds. Then she spoke. Her voice was calm, flat. "Let me save you time," she said. "You'll quit within 48 hours. Daniel didn't react. Instead, he pulled a chair and sat down across from her. "No," he said simply. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "And why?" she asked slowly. "Would you think you're different from the other 23? Daniel leaned forward a little. "Because, unlike them, he actually needed the job," but he didn't say that. Instead, he gave a quiet answer. "Because I'm not here to fix you." For the first time, Evelyn Hayes looked surprised, and in a house where no one stayed. The longest 48 hours had just begun. Evelyn Hayes stared at him as if trying to figure out whether he was stupid or simply desperate. Most caregivers walked into this room nervous, polite, overly careful. Daniel Carter sat there like a man who had already seen worse things in life. That alone irritated her. "You're already making a mistake," Evelyn said flatly. Daniel shrugged. "Probably." The calm answer made her jaw tighten. The silence between them stretched for a moment. The quiet hum of medical machines filled the room. "Name?" she asked. "Daniel. No last name." "Carter." She looked him up and down. His clothes were clean but old. His shoes had clearly seen better days. "You don't look like someone who belongs in this house." Daniel didn't argue with that. "I don't." Another pause. Then Evelyn pressed a button on the side of her wheelchair. The chair rolled closer until she was only a few feet from him. "Let me explain how this works," she said coldly. "You will help me move, assist with therapy, bring my meals, and follow my instructions. You will not talk unless I ask you something." Daniel nodded. "Okay." She frowned. That was too easy. "You will not try to be friendly," she continued. "You will not ask about my accident. You will not treat me like some tragic story." Daniel leaned back slightly. "Not planning to." Again the calm answer. Evelyn felt something strange building under her ribs, irritation mixed with curiosity. Every caregiver before him had tried too hard. Sympathy, fake kindness. This man seemed uninterested. That almost felt insulting. "Most people quit because they can't handle my attitude," she said. Daniel gave a small half smile. "I've handled worse." She raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced at the large window behind her, watching the rain fall against the glass. "Life gets messy sometimes," he said quietly. The simple sentence lingered in the room. Evelyn didn't like it. She hated vague wisdom. It sounded like pity, so she decided to test him. "Help me stand," she ordered suddenly. Daniel stood up immediately. He moved carefully, positioning himself beside the wheelchair exactly the way the agency training manual probably taught him. Evelyn watched closely. Many caregivers panicked during this part, but Daniel stayed steady, lifting her gently as she shifted onto the support frame. Her legs remained lifeless. She hated this moment more than anything, the reminder, the loss. For a split second, frustration flashed across her face. Daniel noticed, but he didn't say anything. No pity, no awkward sympathy, just quiet focus. After she settled back into the chair, Evelyn crossed her arms. "You didn't stare." Daniel looked confused. "Was I supposed to?" She studied him again. Maybe he really was different, or maybe he just hadn't broken yet. Evelyn leaned back slightly. 47 hours left, she muttered. Daniel checked his watch casually. "Guess we'll see, for the first time in weeks." Evelyn Hayes didn't immediately want her caregiver to leave, and that unsettled her more than anger ever had. Before we continue the story, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and if you ever love someone with your pure heart, so subscribe to this channel so you never miss the best stories. By the second morning, Daniel noticed something strange about the Hayes mansion. It was too quiet. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. The kind of silence that builds when people stop talking to each other long ago. The house staff moved carefully, like they were walking around a sleeping tiger. No one stayed in a room longer than necessary, and no one spoke about Evelyn Hayes. Daniel finished making breakfast and rolled the tray toward her room. When he walked in, Evelyn was already awake, staring at her laptop screen. "You're late," she said without looking up. Daniel checked the clock on the wall. 8:02 a.m., 2 minutes, he said. "That's late." He placed the tray on the table beside her. "Then tomorrow I'll aim for 1 minute." She looked at him sharply. Sarcasm. Another thing caregivers usually avoided. Evelyn slowly closed the laptop. "Sit," she said. Daniel pulled the same chair from yesterday and sat down. She pushed the breakfast tray away without touching it. "I'm not hungry." Daniel glanced at the untouched food. "You didn't eat dinner either. That's not your concern." "Actually, it is," he replied calmly. "Part of the job." Her eyes narrowed again. Are you trying to lecture me? No. Good. Daniel waited a few seconds. Then he pushed the tray back toward her. Eat anyway. The room went silent. No one spoke to Evelyn Hayes like that. For a moment, Daniel thought she might actually throw the tray at him. Instead, she stared at him with a look that could freeze water. You're very comfortable here for someone who arrived yesterday. Daniel shrugged. Food gets cold fast. Another long pause. Then slowly she picked up the fork. Just one bite, but Daniel noticed, so did she. And she hated that he noticed. Later that afternoon, Daniel was adjusting the physical therapy equipment when Evelyn spoke again. You're not afraid of me. It wasn't a question. Daniel tightened one of the straps. Should I be? Most people are. He thought about that. Then he shook his head. I've got a 7-year-old daughter, he said. Evelyn frowned slightly. That's supposed to explain something? Daniel gave a small smile. She's scarier than you. For a second, Evelyn actually laughed. It slipped out before she could stop it. A short, quiet sound. Both of them froze. The laugh disappeared instantly from her face. She turned her chair toward the window again. Don't get comfortable, she said coldly. Daniel didn't react. But as he walked out of the room, he heard something unexpected behind him. The faint sound of a fork touching a plate. Evelyn Hayes had started eating the rest of her breakfast. And somewhere deep inside her chest, a wall she built 2 years ago had just developed its first tiny crack. Daniel checked his watch again that evening. 30 hours left in Evelyn's prediction. But something told him she might have miscalculated. By the third day, Daniel had started to understand something important about Evelyn Hayes. Her anger wasn't random, it was defense. Every sharp word, every cold stare, every order she gave, it was like armor she had built around herself. And Daniel had no intention of fighting that armor, he simply worked around it. That afternoon, the rain finally stopped. For the first time since Daniel arrived, sunlight spilled into the garden outside the mansion. Evelyn sat near the large window, her wheelchair facing the trees. She hadn't said much all morning. Daniel noticed she kept staring outside. You want to go out? He asked casually. Her response came instantly. No. Daniel nodded and continued organizing medical supplies. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, Evelyn spoke again. I didn't say I wanted to go out. You didn't, Daniel replied. Silence returned, but this time it felt tense. Evelyn's fingers tightened slightly on the armrest of her chair. The garden used to be her favorite place in the house. Before the accident, before everything became smaller, limited, she hated how much she missed it. Get the ramp ready, she said suddenly. Daniel didn't react dramatically. He simply nodded. All right. Oh, the staff watched quietly as Daniel pushed Evelyn's wheelchair through the glass doors into the garden. No one had seen her outside in months. The air was cool after the rain. Birds moved through the trees. The world looked painfully normal. Daniel rolled the chair along the stone path and stopped near a wooden bench. Evelyn looked around slowly. The garden was exactly the same as before, but everything also felt different, like she didn't belong in it anymore. You can go back inside, she said. Daniel leaned against the bench. I'll stay. I didn't ask you to. Part of the job. She gave him an annoyed look. But something else was there too. Uncertainty. For 2 years, people had treated her in one of two ways. Fear or pity. Daniel did neither. He just stood there like a normal person. It felt strange, uncomfortable, and oddly peaceful. After a few minutes, Evelyn noticed a small flower bed near the path. Her gardener used to take care of it personally. Now the flowers looked wild and uneven. You should tell the gardener. He's doing a terrible job, she muttered. Daniel looked at the flowers. They look fine to me. They're messy. Maybe they like it that way. She glanced at him. That's not how gardens work. Daniel shrugged. Sometimes things grow better when you stop forcing them. The sentence hung in the air. Evelyn didn't respond. But later that evening, when Daniel was leaving the room, she suddenly asked something unexpected. "Your daughter," she said. Daniel paused at the door. "What about her?" Evelyn hesitated for a moment. Then she asked quietly, "How old is she?" It was the first personal question she had asked anyone in a very long time, and neither of them realized yet. That question was the beginning of something neither of them had planned. Daniel stopped at the door when she asked the question. Most people would have answered immediately, but with Evelyn Hayes, every word felt like stepping on thin ice. 7, he said finally. Evelyn looked down at her hands resting on the armrest of the wheelchair. 7. That age sounded painfully young. "Where is she right now?" she asked. "With my sister," Daniel replied. "For now." Evelyn raised an eyebrow slightly. "For now?" Daniel stepped back into the room and leaned against the wall. "I'm working 2 jobs. She stays with my sister during the week. I see her on weekends." Evelyn nodded slowly, but her expression changed. "You don't live with your daughter?" The question came out colder than she meant. Daniel didn't get offended. "Not yet." She studied him carefully. There was no shame in his voice, no defensive tone, just a simple fact. "That sounds irresponsible," she said bluntly. Daniel let out a quiet breath. "Maybe." Evelyn expected an argument, but again he didn't fight her. That made the conversation harder than usual. "Her mother?" Evelyn asked. Daniel's eyes shifted toward the window for a moment. "She left when Lily was 3. The room fell silent. Evelyn immediately regretted asking. Not because she felt guilty, she just hated conversations that turned emotional. But Daniel didn't add drama to the answer. "She wanted a different life," he said simply. Evelyn frowned slightly. "And she just walked away." "Yeah, people are weak," Evelyn muttered. Daniel glanced at her. "Sometimes." He didn't say more, but something about the way he said it made Evelyn feel like the statement applied to more than just Lily's mother. She quickly changed the subject. "Your 48 hours are almost over," she said. Daniel checked the clock on the wall. 2 hours left, and you're still here." "Looks like it." Evelyn leaned back in the wheelchair. For 2 years, every caregiver had broken under the pressure she intentionally created. She pushed them away before they could pity her. But Daniel had done something unexpected. He simply stayed, not trying to fix her, not trying to comfort her, just existing in the same space. It made her uncomfortable, because for the first time since the accident, someone wasn't treating Evelyn Hayes like a problem to solve, and that made her wonder something she hadn't allowed herself to think before. "What does your daughter think about this job?" she asked suddenly. Daniel smiled faintly. "She thinks I work in a castle." Evelyn scoffed. "This place is not a castle." Daniel glanced around the massive room. "To a 7-year-old, it definitely is." For a moment, Evelyn imagined a child running through the empty hallways of the mansion, laughing. The thought felt strange, almost foreign. She looked back at Daniel. "You're not quitting," she said slowly. It wasn't a question anymore. Daniel shook his head. "No." Evelyn stared at him for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised both of them. "Good." Because deep down, she was starting to realize something terrifying. She didn't actually want him to leave. The next morning felt different. Daniel noticed it the moment he walked into Evelyn's room with breakfast. Usually, she would already be working on her laptop or staring out the window with that distant, guarded look. Today, she was simply sitting there, quietly watching the garden. "You're on time," she said when he placed the tray beside her. Daniel checked the clock. 2 minutes early. She nodded slightly. Acceptable. It was the closest thing to a compliment he had received from her. Daniel sat in the chair across from her while she slowly began eating. A few days ago, she wouldn't have touched the food. Now the plate was almost half empty. Progress came in small ways, but it was still progress. After a moment, Evelyn asked another question. "Your daughter, Lily." Daniel looked up. "Yes?" "Does she know what happened to her mother?" Daniel leaned back slightly. Not the full story. Why? He thought about it. Because she's still a kid. Evelyn frowned. That's not an answer. Daniel shrugged. Some truths don't help children grow. They just make them carry things they shouldn't. The words landed heavier than he expected. Evelyn stared at him. For a brief moment, something flickered across her face. Guilt. It vanished quickly. You sound like someone who's made many mistakes, she said. Daniel gave a small smile. Everyone has. Evelyn didn't argue with that. She simply looked down at the empty plate in front of her. 2 years ago, she had been one of the most powerful women in the country. Investors feared her decisions. Employees followed every word she said. Now she struggled just to move across a room. The anger inside her had grown so large that it pushed everyone away. Maybe that had been easier. Loneliness was simpler than disappointment. But Daniel's presence was starting to disturb that comfortable isolation, and she didn't know if she liked that. Suddenly, Daniel's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen and smiled. Evelyn noticed. You can answer it, she said. It's okay. Answer it. Daniel picked up the phone and pressed the speaker button. Hey, Lily. A cheerful child's voice immediately filled the quiet room. Dad, guess what? I got an A on my spelling test. Daniel laughed. I knew you would. While they talked, Evelyn pretended to focus on her laptop, but she kept listening. The little girl sounded so alive, excited about small things, laughing easily. After a minute, Lily asked loudly, Are you still working in the castle? Daniel glanced at Evelyn. Yep. Does the queen still live there? Daniel tried not to laugh. Evelyn slowly raised an eyebrow. Yes, Daniel said carefully. The queen is still here. Lily gasped dramatically. Is she mean? Daniel looked directly at Evelyn. Then he answered, No. There was a short silence on the phone. Really? Lily asked. Daniel nodded, even though she couldn't see him. Really? Evelyn didn't say anything. But something about that simple answer sat quietly in her chest long after the call ended. Because for the first time in a long time, someone had chosen to see more than just her anger, and she didn't know what to do with that. After the call ended, the room stayed quiet for a long moment. Daniel put his phone back in his pocket and returned to adjusting the therapy equipment like nothing unusual had happened. But Evelyn was still thinking about the conversation. The word queen echoed in her mind. 2 years ago, people had called her something similar, not a queen, a tyrant, a woman who crushed competitors, fired employees without hesitation, and built an empire through pure control. She used to believe that was strength. Now she wasn't so sure. You lied to your daughter, Evelyn said suddenly. Daniel glanced up. How? You told her I wasn't mean. Daniel shrugged lightly. I didn't lie. Evelyn almost laughed at that. You clearly haven't met me. Daniel leaned against the table. I have. And? And you're angry. The answer was calm, direct. Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly. That's your professional opinion? Daniel shook his head. That's my human opinion. She looked away toward the window, angry. That word barely scratched the surface. The accident had taken everything from her in seconds. Her mobility, her career, her control. And the people she once called friends slowly disappeared afterward. Investors replaced her. Board members moved on. The world kept spinning without Evelyn Hayes. That truth had burned deeper than the injury. You don't understand, she said quietly. Daniel didn't rush to answer. Maybe not, he admitted. But anger usually hides something else. Evelyn turned her chair toward him slowly. Oh, really? Like what? Pain, Daniel said. The word landed like a stone in the room. Evelyn's expression hardened immediately. You're not my therapist. No. Then stop analyzing me. Daniel nodded. All right. He went back to working without another word. And strangely, that annoyed her even more. Because she realized something uncomfortable. He wasn't trying to fix her. He simply said the truth and moved on. That made it harder to ignore. Later that evening, Daniel was preparing to leave the room when Evelyn spoke again. Wait. He stopped at the door. Yes? Evelyn hesitated. The words felt unfamiliar in her mouth. Your daughter, she said slowly. Does she ever visit you at work? Daniel shook his head. No. My sister usually keeps her at home. Evelyn looked toward the long empty hallway outside her room. The mansion was enormous. Too big for one person. Too quiet. Then she said something unexpected. She can visit this weekend. Daniel blinked. You're serious? Evelyn crossed her arms. It's a castle, right? Castles shouldn't be empty. Daniel studied her face carefully. For the first time since he arrived, she didn't look like someone hiding behind anger. She looked like someone testing the idea of letting life back in. And neither of them realized yet that Lily's visit would change everything inside this house. Saturday morning arrived with a strange kind of energy in the Hayes mansion. For the first time in years, the place didn't feel like a silent museum. Daniel stood near the front entrance, waiting. Beside him, Evelyn sat in her wheelchair near the large window in the hall. She had insisted she wasn't nervous, but she had changed her outfit twice. Daniel noticed. He didn't mention it. A car pulled into the driveway. Seconds later, the front door opened and a small girl rushed inside. Dad! Lily ran straight into Daniel's arms. He lifted her easily and hugged her tight. I missed you, kid. I missed you too. Then Lily looked around with wide eyes. The huge staircase, the high ceilings, the long hallways. Her mouth dropped open. This is the castle? Daniel laughed. Yep. Then Lily noticed the woman sitting quietly nearby. Evelyn Hayes, the queen? Lily slowly walked toward her, curiosity all over her face. Daniel watched carefully, unsure how Evelyn would react. Lily stopped right in front of the wheelchair. You're the queen? She asked seriously. Daniel almost choked, trying not to laugh. Evelyn looked at the little girl for a long second. Then, unexpectedly, she nodded. Something like that. Lily studied her carefully. Then she said something no adult had dared to say in years. You don't look mean. Daniel froze. Evelyn blinked. Then Lily added innocently, you just look sad. The words were simple, honest, and they hit Evelyn harder than any insult ever had. For 2 years people had feared her anger, but this little girl saw straight through it. Evelyn looked away quickly, her throat tightening in a way she didn't understand. Lily suddenly smiled brightly. That's okay though, she said. My dad gets sad sometimes too. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. Thanks for sharing that. Lily ignored him and pointed toward the garden outside. Do queens go outside? Evelyn looked at the sunlight filling the garden. For 2 years she had hidden inside these walls, from the world, from failure, from herself. Then she looked back at Lily and made a decision. Yes, Evelyn said quietly. They do. Daniel helped guide the wheelchair toward the open doors. Lily ran ahead excitedly into the garden. For the first time since the accident, Evelyn Hayes didn't feel like a broken billionaire hiding from life. She felt like someone stepping back into it. And strangely enough, it started because a poor single dad refused to walk away. And a little girl refused to see her as a monster. Sometimes the strongest healing doesn't come from doctors, money, or power. It comes from kindness, patience, and people who refuse to give up on you when you've already given up on yourself. This story teaches us that anger often hides deep pain, and sometimes all a person needs is someone who stays, someone who sees the human behind the hurt, because even the most broken lives can be rebuilt. One small moment of understanding at a time.